I am going to read The Deep End by Traci Abramson. We're on chapter 5. Look at what my bookmark is. The person who got me these, you know who you are. I am really tired. Well, I'm not really tired. I feel a little bit tired because my eyes are dry. And I didn't support my neck when I was sleeping last night. And I slept for a really long time, probably like 10 hours. Because I had a week of like only sleeping for 5 to 6 hours only. So I had to catch up on sleep. Anyways, I think I'm gonna do like a soft spoken reading. That way you can like get cozy up in bed like I am and drift off to sleep. So go ahead, close your eyes, close your eyes, close your eyes. Sorry for like how crazy my hair is. It's like shower, bed head, and a day full of driving, so. Leaning on the railing of her hotel room balcony, Jill looked over the water just a short distance away. The waves rolled lazily over the sand, the roar of the ocean filling the air. Despite the palm trees surrounding the hotels along the main strip in Palm Beach, Aruba was not the lush tropical island Jill had imagined. A dry desert breeze ruffled her short hair as she bit into the pastry she had ordered from the room service. A few ambitious souls jogged along the beach despite the early hour. Jill glanced at her watch, wondering how much longer she should wait before calling Doug's room to see if he was up. They had arrived so late the night before that they had barely managed to find a restaurant still open to serve them dinner. Doug had been his usual closed-mouthed self until they had finally gotten to their hotel. He hadn't told her much, but Jill knew enough about this particular case to understand the result of Leonard Abbott's death. Throughout the night, her mind had been filled with concern for her former roommate, now known as CJ. Everything had seemed so normal when she and CJ had lived together in Texas. Though CJ's real name was Crystal Jones, at the time she had been using the alias Kylie Ramsey. Despite the fact that she was in the witness protection program, she had made a full life for herself. She spent her time swimming, going to school, and dating Matt Whitmore, an up-and-coming baseball player. Jill had met and started dating Doug. Then in a single instant, everything had changed. Jill remembered all too well the day CJ disappeared from Texas, the day Doug had barely managed to sneak her past the men sent to kill her. Even now, Jill could only pray that Doug and those working with him would be astute enough to see danger coming before it was too late. Walking back into her room, Jill glanced at her watch again. She waited until almost 8 before she dialed the number for Doug's room. The phone rang 5 times before she finally hung up. Maybe he's in the shower, she thought to herself, wondering when he would be ready to go out and see the island. Less than a minute later, a knock sounded at her door. She opened it up to find Doug standing in the hall. Good, you're already up. Doug leaned in and gave her a quick kiss. Are you ready to head out? Jill nodded. I've been ready. I should have known you would be anxious to get the day started. I went out and rented a car. It's parked out front. They made their way to the elevators and then outside to the tiny hatchback. He shrugged and opened the passenger door for her. Beggars can't be choosers. As long as it gets us where we're going, Jill said. As he pulled out the parking lot, she added, so where are we going? I thought you might be willing to do a little poking around with me. What kind of poking? Jill asked suspiciously. I wanted to start at the dive shop that Abbott used the day he died. You don't expect me to go scuba diving with them, do you? No. I actually want you to go in and pretend you're thinking about it. You know, ask a bunch of questions, Doug explained. He went on to point out the specific information he needed based on what he had gleaned. Did I make you yawn? I hope so. Gleaned from the initial reports and suggested how she might lead the conversation where he wanted it to go. When they arrived at the dive shop, Jill approached the place alone. A boat was already preparing to set out, and Jill thought she might have already missed her opportunity to talk to the dive instructors. She passed by the modest dive shop and walked toward the dock, noticing several air tanks that were waiting to be loaded on the boat. A man in his late 20s stepped off the boat and headed toward her. "Hi there," Jill greeted him, moving aside as he approached the air tanks. The man smiled, glimpsing the strap of her swimsuit beneath her t-shirt. "Are you here for a dive?" "No, actually, I've never gone scuba diving before." "Well, we can set you up if you're interested," he told her with a grin. "You'll have to take one of our certification courses, but it only takes a morning, and then you can be diving with the instructor as soon as this afternoon." "I'm still not sure I'm ready to breathe my air out of one of those," Jill pointed to the air tanks. "It takes a little getting used to, but it's really easy." "How does it work? I mean, how can you tell how much air you have, and how long can you stay under?" "Let me show you." He motioned for her to follow him into a room full of dive equipment. He showed her the basic equipment, explaining how the air gauges worked and how each diver rented the necessary equipment and weights if they didn't have their own. "Those air tanks over there?" Jill started as she stepped back outside. "Are they for specific people, or do you just give them to whoever needs one?" "Usually if people need an air tank, they sign up the night before, so that we have them ready by morning." Jill saw Doug come out of the dive shop and head toward her. Doug nodded at the man and put a proprietary hand on Jill's shoulder. "Has he convinced you that it's safe yet?" "I just don't know if I want to try that." Jill forced herself to shudder. "I mean, what happened to that poor man a couple weeks ago?" Jill turned back toward the dive instructor. "I'm sure you heard about it, the diving accident." The man tensed briefly before responding. "That was unfortunate, but if the guy had stayed with his instructor, it never would have happened." "He went off on his own?" Jill asked incredulously. The instructor nodded. "Apparently he lost touch with the rest of his group and panicked. I guess he tried to surface too fast because by the time the instructor found him, he was already dead." Jill turned back to look at Doug. "If it's all the same to you, I think I'll stick with snorkeling." "I had a feeling you would say that." Doug nodded to the instructor. "Have a good one." Jill waited until Doug pulled out into the light traffic before asking, "What did you find out?" "Not much. Everything seems to agree with the witness reports that Abbott went on the advanced dive and apparently went off on his own." "It could have happened that way," Joel shrugged. "His wife said that he's been scuba diving for years. It just doesn't add up that an experienced diver would surface too fast." "Maybe something was wrong with his equipment." "The island police said they checked it out and it was fine. Then Abbott was either out of practice and got careless, or someone did a great job of making it look like an accident." "I just wish I could find something that would tell me which one." Doug pulled the car into a parking lot near the marina. "What are we doing here?" "I thought we could go for a sail." "I think I can handle that." Jill grinned. The woman who owned the sailboat Doug had chartered lived below deck when she wasn't working. Shirley had left her home in Miami nearly 15 years before she had chartered on about the history of the island, the tourism industry, and the constant influx of tourists from the U.S. Her skin was weathered from the sun and the wind, making her look about 50 years old, but Doug guessed that she was closer to 40. Doug only had to ask a couple of general questions about scuba diving before Shirley started rambling on about the accident. The news was still fresh on the island, and she was already worried about how the bad press might affect tourism and the diving industry in the future. Above them, the sails billowed in the wind, and except for an occasional boat, most of the water traffic was far behind them. Doug studied the island, anticipating from the curve of the land that they were nearing the site where Abbott had died. Jill moved onto the deck to soak up some sun. Her simple blue swimsuit was a modest one-piece, and she had carefully applied sunscreen to protect herself against the hot sun. Doug wished that he could have relaxed on deck with her and just enjoyed the view. Turning away from his beautiful fiancée, Doug sat with his back to her and tried to glean from Shirley's wealth of knowledge of local diving spots. Still listening to her, Doug absorbed her descriptions of the dive sites as they approached Malmock Reef. From the map he had studied earlier, it was one of only 4 dive sites along this section of the island. When Shirley stopped to take a breath, Doug asked, "Do a lot of people come out and use these sites?" "It varies. Most people go to the sites that are closer to the hotels. These take a bit longer to get to." Shirley pointed farther out to sea. "That one over there is a beginner dive, so it's used pretty frequently. Apparently some beginners were diving over there around the time the accident occurred here at Malmock." "Was the other group still around when the accident happened?" Shirley shook her head. "I heard they were already long gone. The beginner group usually only goes down for 45 minutes or so. That site is only about 35 feet deep." "What about this one?" Doug asked as she slid near Malmock Reef. "It's about twice that. 70 feet, give or take a few." "Sounds kind of deep," Doug commented. "Not really. Even beginners sometimes go down 40 or 50 feet. 70 isn't that bad for someone with some experience." "Sounds like he wasn't experienced enough." Doug turned and studied Malmock Reef. The beginner dive site was some distance away, far enough that beginners probably would not have noticed anything suspicious. It was perfect, Doug thought. Just deep enough for Abbott to get into trouble, but not quite deep enough to raise suspicions. Doug glanced up at Jill. "She's right," he thought to himself. Either Abbott really had gotten careless, or someone had gone to great lengths to make his death look like an accident. Next time, we will be reading Chapter 6. Thanks so much for watching. Have a wonderful day or sleep.